In this video, we're going to set up our input so that when the player hits up, we print out a message that says up arrow was pressed. When they push down, it says down arrow. And when they hit enter, it says you hit enter. Let's jump in and get started. First things first, I'm going to fix a bit of a boo-boo that I made a couple of videos ago. I wrote pick and number. Crazy. You guys have been yelling at me and saying that's not how you speak the English, Rick. So apologies for that. Okay, so now on to what we're doing, which is creating some input for the player. And we need to give the player one more step of instruction. So let's create a new line here, debug.log. And then again, open brackets, quotation marks. In here, we want to say something along the lines of, tell me if your number is higher or lower than my guess. And at the moment, we don't have my guess in there. The first guess, as we've said before, will be 500. So let's bake that in lower or higher than 500. And your brain at this point, semicolon the end, your brain at this point should be saying, hang on a minute, we could make that a variable, which we absolutely will in some upcoming videos when we get to the point where we're calculating the guess. But for now, we'll just bake that in there and say, is it higher or lower than 500? That'll be our first guess. And then we need another line, debug.log, to tell the player how to give their input. Debug.log, quotation marks, it will be something along the line, so push up equals higher, and then we will say push down equals lower, and the last one we need is, what do we need here? So return or enter, we'll say enter, because most keyboards have enter. This is something we'll encounter in this video, that return and enter are a little bit synonymous and interchangeable. We will say enter, so push enter, enter equals correct. And again, I've done some capitalization mistakes in here. We'll just make this capital L. Doesn't matter at all. Just being a little bit pedantic, and on the end, a semicolon. So there we go. We've added 2 more lines just to give the player some instructions. And our next process to say, okay, we need some input, and we need to be able to display what the player has pushed. So I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, I want to tell you our mission. Ben and I, we have a mission for you, which is, wait, hang on, sorry, wrong slide. Okay, our mission for you is to train you to be an expert at solving problems. That's what we're up to. It's more than just, hey, follow what we're doing and you'll kind of pick it up. That's part of what we're doing, but we really want you to think the way we're thinking. So in this video, I'm going to show you a little bit of the thought process that you could go through to solve a problem, and we'll be practicing it over and over and over throughout the course. So by the end of the course, you're an absolute ninja in solving problems. That's our objective here. So what is our current problem? What we're trying to do is, if the player pushes a certain key, we want to display a certain message. And as we go throughout this section, we'll add a little bit more complexity to it. But that's the foundation of it. And that's the foundation of many games. If you want your player to jump, you push a button. If you want your player to shoot, you push a button or a key. So that's what we're trying to do. Specifically, push the up arrow, we want to say you pushed up. The down arrow, you push down. And enter to say correct, to print that to the player. So that's our current problem. And depending upon your knowledge or your skill, you might already have some pieces of information to solve the problem. So for example, what we know already is this has got to do with input. We're looking for some sort of input for the player. So what we need to do is to take that little bit of knowledge and then expand on it to find the right syntax, the right code, the right methods to have this work within our game. And the place that I'm going to point you to, for now, you don't need to understand all of this yet, the place I'm going to point you to is Unity's documents, and these are incredibly useful for solving all sorts of things. So open up a new browser window and type in here Unity Docs, and then you can see I've already searched for it before, player input. That's what I'm searching for at the moment. I want to know what the docs say about player input. See up the very top, Unity Scripting API, that's usually what we're looking for, and it says input, great. We'll click on that. And then I'll also give you a link to this in the resources, but what we're doing here is we're training our problem solving. So I don't want you to just be, click the link I give you, I want you to actually be searching for it and finding it and going through this process. Now within the docs, there'll be a lot of stuff that I don't expect you to understand or recognize at the moment, but as you go through this course, things will jump out and you'll be able to find what you're looking for a lot more clearly. So within here, within this input, I'm looking for, under methods, looking for something that resembles pushing a key or pushing a key on the keyboard, and I see get key down. Aha, that's what we're looking for. If I click on that, we can see input.getKeyDown has to do with returns true during the frame the user starts pressing down the key identified by name. We'll talk about frame in this video as well to do with start and update. And so we need a particular key we're identifying by name. The first one we're looking for in here is going to be the up key. So if we have a look for up key, if we scroll down, within here we can find something that represents the key code. This is going to be a whole bunch of the types of keys that we can choose. So I click on key code. That's the particular code for the key we're clicking on. So we've got all these different properties down here. It can be the letters of the alphabet. It can be different keys on the keyboard. What I'm looking for is some sort of up arrow, and just there, up arrow. So if I click on up arrow, it's going to take me through to the specific code, the specific syntax I'm looking for. And here we go. So you can see in the update method, that's a great clue. We need to put this in update. It detects when the key up arrow, the up arrow key is pressed. And then we have our code here, and I'm going to copy that code. So highlight it and copy it and take it over into Visual Studio. So if you've just been surfing along and watching at this point, this is a great time. If you need to pause the video and find the link and go to this particular reference, it's great for you to copy this yourself so that you're going through this motion. So copy that piece of code back over into our Visual Studio. I'm going to paste that under update, and you can see if input.getKeyDown, key code up arrow. That might all seem like a little bit gibberish for now, but we'll explain it more as we go through this section. You'll understand this better and better. But basically what this is saying is if something is true, and the something in this case is we want to know if someone's pushed a key down, and was that key the up arrow? And if that's the case, then write something to the console, up arrow key was pressed. Fantastic. Now we can leave this as is, but I want to leave you with one little bit of best practice in here. And that's something to do with our curly brackets. So you can see curly brackets like these ones here on update, these ones here on start. Whenever we see curly brackets, that means there's a code block in between those curly brackets. And all those aspects of the code block are statements that are executed one after another when that code block is executed. If we have this if statement, it's saying if this thing is true, then do these things in here. If there's only one, you don't need the curly brackets, but it's good habit to add the curly brackets in here, one before, and then we'll go down to the end of debug.log and enter and put another one at the end. Visual Studio knows where it should line up, so that if in the future we want to put in another statement and another statement and another statement, probably not gobbledygook like that, then it will execute them all together and it won't be confused. If we don't have these curly brackets for our code block, then it can cause some issues and some errors, and there's a good chance we'll forget to put them in and we won't know what is going on. So you can see them here, and just a little note while I'm in this conversation, I promise you we'll get to start and update in just a moment. You can see that I've got my open curly brackets on a new line and my closed curly brackets on a new line as well. That is a total preference thing. So you could have it, it's totally valid to have this on the previous line like that. You could also have this curly bracket down there on the end. It's not the white space that matters. So it's not the number of enters, it's not the number of spaces and tabs that matters to Visual Studio. All that matters is the order that it finds it in. So after it has this particular, is this thing true, it wants a curly bracket, and then it's going to do all the things that's in between these two curly brackets. But from our readability point of view, which is huge, it's really important that we can read our code. We want to have that on a new line and that on a new line so that we can see this is what is going to be executed. That's my particular preference. That's Ben's particular preference. Yours might be different. It's totally fine. Different people. It's like, some people like red and some people like blue, but that's the particular way that we do things. Now, you might have a look at update and start and see that they're in a different spot. That's because our template for this script has been set up that way. That's fine. I'm not going to dig into changing the template just at the moment, but if you wanted to be super pedantic, you might say, well, let's just pop that down there, and in our start method, we'll pop this curly bracket down on a new line as well. Both of them are correct, but we find this a little bit more readable. Okay, so that's about curly brackets. That's about getting our input into the system here. Let's save this, and we'll see if that works. Then we'll come back and talk about start and update. So save that over into Unity, push play. We can see we've got our instructions in here, push up for higher and lower. Now, if I push up, then it says up key was pressed. Excellent, success, that is working. Okay, so we now have successfully put in player input. Now let's talk about start and update and what we've just done. So start is a method that runs once, and it runs when the script is first initialized. It says here, use for initialization. So when the game first runs, our start method will run, and all these things will happen once. So it's really good for doing things that are to do with setup. However, if we put our input into start, then once our very first starting point has come and gone, we won't be able to access that anymore because this is only relevant within start. And update is telling us to do something. As you can see here in these comments, we haven't talked about comments, but anytime there's these double forward slashes, anything after that is ignored. It's just a comment for our purpose. So you could write anything you want in here and it will be ignored by the engine. Okay, so this is saying update is called once per frame. That means every single frame. And so if you've got a super fast computer, your computer might be getting, I don't know, 100 frames per second. It might be getting 200 frames per second. You might have a slow computer getting 10 frames per second. So we don't know exactly how many frames are being calculated per second, but what we do know is that update will occur on every single one of those frames. So that is the update method is where we put anything that is needed to have instant reaction, such as our input here. We need to be able to do it at any point in time. It needs to be happening on an ongoing basis. So that's just a quick intro between start and update. And also, we now have one if statement, which we'll talk about a lot more in the next video, where we have our input for the up arrow was pressed. Now I have a challenge for you, and that challenge is to complete the other scenarios. So if the player pushes down, we want to print something. If the player pushes enter, or I'll give you a hint here, it's return in terms of the keyword that we need to use. Enter, Unity and Visual Studio don't know what that means, even though my keyboard has enter written right on it. For some reason, it is return. I guess back old school computers used to say return, so that is what it is. So pause the video now, take on that challenge. If you get stuck, then have a look in the Unity documents we're just looking in, copy the same flow that we've gone through here in terms of the input get key down and the debug.log to do the other two scenarios, down and return, and I'll see you back here when you've got that done. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you took on that challenge and you're not just sitting around waiting for me to go through it. This is all about how you get better at these things is you try it and you take it on yourself. So if we start typing this out, it's good to practice the typing of it. We copied the first one, but we can type this next one. If input.getKeyDown, okay, and then what sort of key down are we looking for? Well, we need the key code of, I'm going to have a guess here and say down arrow. Now, here's another thing I'm going to introduce. We're introducing a lot in this video. It's coming thick and fast, is that Visual Studio has a suspicion of what we want to write, so it's always trying to auto-complete for us. So it's trying to say, I'm pretty sure you want to type down arrow or page down. These are the words I know of that can come after key code that have down in them. And then if I type part of it and then I see that highlighted is the rest of it, I can hit tab and it will complete it for me. So it completed down arrow. And then I'm going to skip to the end, hit enter, open my curly brackets, hit enter again to get a new line, debug.log down arrow key was pressed, and we'll change this to something more meaningful for our game in the near future, but for now we're just doing it very functional. You pushed a thing, down key pressed, semicolon, and then we will go underneath that and type if input.getKeyDown, and I see how I auto completed there, and we have open brackets, key code, so I can type K and it's already highlighting it for me, so hit tab dot down arrow. Well, we don't want down arrow, we want return. So type R, E, and you can see the rest of it's available for me there. Hit spacebar, sorry, hit tab, and then return down to the end, enter, open squiggly brackets, curly brackets, debug.log, and we'll say you hit enter. So return, I keep getting it that, yeah, actually enter is what it is on the keyboard. Even though we need to call it as return because that's what the key is known as in the system, the player's going to know it as enter. And then it's a statement, so all of our statements end in a semicolon, as you can see. Okay, again, let's hit save. Back over into Unity, you can see that we've got an option here that says clear on play. So as soon as I hit play, it's going to clear all of my console information. I could also just click clear right now and just clears it all so that it's nice and clean and ready to go. I click play, we'll get the intro information, our 6 lines now. I can hit up, I can hit down, and I can hit enter. And it logged all of those correctly. Great work. I know that was a lot to get through in this video. I know there was a lot of this means that, and we'll get to it in a minute, but we've now covered start methods, update methods. We've talked about our curly brackets. We talked about how to use input. We've also been looking at the Unity documents to get some more information on when we're stuck, how do we find the syntax and move forward and solve problems. And we are well on our way to making a fun little game that we can play where the computer will be guessing our number. So I will see you in the next video.